What's up guys, Cass here from GiveWave Studios, and on this one I'm going to show you guys how to turn all these pattern pieces that you see here into this awesome Inosuke mask. Is it a mask or is it a helmet? Not sure. Helm mask, featuring light up LED eyes and all. Alright, let's get it. So first thing we're going to do is transfer all of our pattern pieces to EVA foam, and do be mindful that anything that says X2 LR or anything that says LR in general, you need to flip to the other side. So I'm going to trace it, I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to trace the other side. Alright, so be mindful of those instructions. Do that for all of your parts. Cut out all of your parts out of foam, and I will catch you guys for the next step. Now we officially have all of the pieces that we need to build our Inosuke head. Okay, so I'll just be going through each section separately, pausing when I think it's difficult, but for the most part you will just be assembling the pieces as listed on your patterns. If you bought the DIY kit, of course, just follow along with the video. Eventually everything will make sense. Alright, if you did have foam that is textured on one side, you do just want to make sure that, you know, from jump, all of your information is where it needs to be on your pieces. Alright, so we're going to start with these guys. So we're going to heat these on both sides. We'll start with one. Okay, once our part is heated, we're going to grab something spherical. I happen to have a nice rounded anvil here in the shop, but there's no reason why you can't use your elbow or use your knee or any other rounded surface to get the curve, and you can even roll this over and use your thumb. All right, however, get it done. So round this off. We're just giving it a bit of a more dimensional curve to it, and when you see the before and after, it'll make sense. And we're basically going to be doing this for most of the other parts. I'll do this one kind of like step by step, and then I'll fast forward through the next few pieces because the process is going to be very similar. Alright, so we're going from a flat piece like this to something that looks more like this. As you can see, this doesn't even want to lay down. It stands up. It's doing its thing. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for this. After that, we're going to glue this shut, and then we're going to glue the two pieces together. Make sense? I'm going to fast forward through the steps for that one and catch you guys for it. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly show you guys how these guys come together. So there's no tick marks for this. You just want to align the two pieces of foam to the surface as flush as possible, and then just squeeze these down on each other, making sure they are nice and closed. Let's keep going. Okay, so the very beginning of this, so the front of this, is probably the hardest part, but it's really not that bad. It's just because the curves are very strange. So I'm going to go ahead and start at the tip here and curve these out onto each other like this first. So I'm attaching the surface first, basically, and then with the surface held flush up against itself, I'm just going to bend it the other way. Okay, that way I don't struggle with this final curve piece here too much. And everything else is pretty simple. Keep your thumb over your seam to constantly get a feel for it. Well, whenever you can. Sometimes it gets too wide and you can't. You just have to use your eyes. But keep basically stitching this together, trying to keep your surface edges as flush to each other as possible, and eventually you will come up with a shape. Alright, fast forward time. Okay, and when you're done, your shape should look something like this, and it should probably even stand on its own. Okay, so now we're going to move on to these guys, and you will attach these where they correspond. Now remember that the little icons that we have on here, so this little triangle matches with this little triangle, so that way you know that this side goes to here. Same thing here. Okay, this side goes to here, and we've already labeled our parts left, left, so you know where everything goes. All right. All right, now on to the nose. If you guys remember, we had transferred all of our information onto our patterns, and one thing that you want to keep in mind is this. So this could be a little bit confusing. So this is the 45-degree cut that you're doing. This is the table. Okay, this small line that you see here, that's your table, that's your cutting surface. This is your foam. So if this is the surface of your foam, then the cut is going outwards, and you can see it if you're looking top down. So it's not going in, so it's not an inner bevel, it's an outer bevel. It's a bevel that goes out, and you can see it from the outside. What that translates to is your piece of foam is going to be here. You can do this one of two ways. Okay, you can cut your foam like this at this angle, right, all the way through. But I found it easier if you, so you know that your angle needs to go this way. That's fine. This is an awkward cut this way. It's easier to cut along your line here. So what I'm going to do is flip my foam and cut inwards into it, using the line as my guide at whatever angle the legend asks for you to do. So, all right. Okay, so we have an angle, so that's one down. So same thing for the other side. These needs to match, so I'm going to go ahead and flip it. Now this is much easier to do while this is still connected to the larger piece. Okay, and if you find that you need a little bit more angle, you can always grab some sandpaper or maybe a rotary tool and just kind of bevel that a little bit more. All right, so same thing as before. We're going to shape these. We're going to glue these two together like so. All right, and then we're going to attach it. So fast forward time. Okay, and for these guys, you're not trying to curve it all the way. You're just kind of doing this, you know, upside down J shape. So we're going from this flat piece to something like this, so that when it connects, as you can see, three-dimensionally, it starts looking more like a snout. So no need to curve this all the way around, just curve the top piece here, and then we're going to continue gluing everything together. And so on this one, I like to glue both ends together first, and then just kind of work my way back and forth, making sure that the middle is nice and flush on the surface. Okay, but you know, that's just how I do it. You can do it however you feel works best for you. Alright, and we have a semblance of a snout, and then this is going to wedge itself right here. So fold this nicely, use your seam to line it up. Okay, as long as you got part of the middle done, alright, all you got to do is just follow your line and make sure that these end edge to edge, like so. Turn this around, same thing here. There are no registration marks for this side. It's just it's a super short transition, so there's no need for it. And we have it. Kind of looks like a duck right now, but we'll get to the point where we start looking more like Inosuke in a minute. All right, so now these. Okay, so the general shape you want with these is something that curves this way, right? You can see the large area curves out, the small area curves back in. Okay, that's going to create the bottom of the throat area there. So even if you don't do this, how the lines are here will force it to align that way anyway, so you might as well do it while you're heating it to make your life a little easier. bottom piece with the proper shape this time. Alright, now if you guys notice, I have attached a couple of pieces of duct tape here on the inside and one on the outside here. And inside of your top area, you're going to measure 2 inches from the bottom here to this line that you see here. And this tape, we're going to slide the bottom part into the top part. Alright, there we go. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab my piece of tape right here, and I'm going to line up this edge here with my line there. Okay, so that edge on the inside goes in there, and I'm going to use that piece of tape to just kind of hold that in place, and use the seam because this is aligning straight to the middle. So something like that. There we go. Now if I use my light, you guys can see the seam basically falls in and of itself, and I know the duct tape is masking it, but this edge of this bottom piece is right up against that outline. Alright, so that's number 1. Number 2 is now we're going to place the top piece over. Okay, and what you guys are going to want to do is find the proper alignment for the top and the bottom of your pieces here. And really what you want to do is, you see here how there's like a little bit of an opening. You want to get this to the point where there is barely an opening. So I don't know if you guys can tell, but there's only a sliver, which is fine because that's where this stuff is going to go for the tusk. Okay, so if you have a little bit of sliver there, that's fine. One of the key things that you'll notice is that this edge here kind of aligns with this seam here. So that's one way of knowing that you kind of have found yourself in the right position. Okay, same thing here. That edge aligns with that seam, and once you have that, you want to go inside and use those pieces of tape and lock that into place, and then you can let it be, and you more or less have where it is that you want to be. This one is not quite lined up, so I'm going to go back in, release, line up, tape. Okay, and yeah, that's really the most difficult part, is getting everything to line up nicely. And once you have this, okay, your snout is going to go here on this part, and what you can do is cut off this excess. I'll mark it. Okay. You can cut it off from like here, so I'd say about 1/2 inch. Take off 1/2 inch of the bottom lip. Now I make this longer because everyone's vision of how long Inosuke's snout is different. So I left this way so that if people wanted to make it a little longer, they could. If they wanted to make it a little shorter and make it look the way that you feel is most accurate. All right. So I feel for me the most accurate is to cut out 1/2 inch of the jaw. That way this lands right inside of the top of the snout, and then it doesn't get in the way for when I put the actual nose of the snout in front of it. Okay, that's more or less what we have. And if you wanted to take that a little further, you can even while you have this in line, just kind of put some lines on the outside there. The back parts here are a little flat, so if you wanted to cut some of the stuff out to add a little bit more detail, which I'm going to do, you can also do that also. So I'm just adding some extra fur lines here. Alright, so technically the nose from the legend in your pattern asks that you cut this out of 5mm foam. I'm going to do this one out of 10mm just because I want to try and give it a little bit more dimensionality. I already did it out of 5mm in the first version that I did, so I just want to try something a little different. So this is just going to be a little extra step that I hope works out, but if not, you guys can always just go flat with the nose. And all I've really been doing is I've marked the nostril holes on both the front and the back, and I've done this 45-degree bevel cut on the front and on the back to get the result that you guys see within the show. So we're looking at something like this versus something like this. Not too bad of a difference. Definitely, again, way less visibility, but I already have one mask. I might as well try a detail that's a little bit different. But if you guys want visibility, do definitely, regardless if you go with a 10mm or a 5 or an 8mm, do cut out your shapes. You can probably round these edges off with some type of rotary tool, but do give yourself the most amount of visibility than you can, by cutting out those two holes. Alright, so that's that, and then next we're going to put the teeth together, which are these little stacks here. And all we're going to do for these is make sure that we glue them in the right orientation. As you'll notice, this has a little bit of a larger outer piece, so you do want these to be opposite each other, and then find the matching part and glue it to it. This needs to be flipped, and there we go. While I wait for these to dry, I'm going to go ahead and cut that excess on the bottom lip that we talked about earlier. Let's go. And then I can put these guys together. Fairly simple. We're going to end up shaping these guys a little bit more so they feel a little bit more organic and less flat. Okay. Alright, we got that out of the way. We got our nose out of the way. As far as this is concerned, once you have your general lines here for where this lines up, okay, I would do this with the new edges that I did in the back also. So, okay. Right, once we have that, we can separate these two, because what we're going to do is paint them separately to make our lives easier. If you want to paint the whole thing in one go, by all means, feel free to glue the two halves together, but I will paint them first and glue them after. And any seam filling and cleaning up that you want to do, this is the point to do it. Alright, we're in the chop shop now, so basically what I'm going to do is just sand down these edges a little bit, soften them up, round them off a little bit. I'm going to use my rotary tool. You guys can use just regular old sandpaper, or use a sanding stick. I'll have a link to the tutorial for that in the description. And yeah, so I'm just gonna go through that process and shape these guys real quick, and I'll show you guys a little before and after. Alright, and this is the nose. You can see this is after, this is before. Right? I'm gonna slightly sand these down on the back here a little bit, just because you'll be able to see it from the back, but I'm not gonna bother with the inside of here because that's gonna be my visibility going out. So no need for me to do all of this work. Okay, and on our tooth, we're gonna go from something flat like this to something a little bit more dimensional, like what you're seeing on your left. Right, so that's pretty much the shape of the teeth. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. Catch you guys for the next. All right, so with our nose done and our teeth done, we can put that aside. We'll heat seal these while we heat up these so we can curve them. Now for the ears, you'll notice that there is a side that has large teeth and a side that has smaller teeth. The side that has smaller teeth is the back of the ear. So if you look at the example here, you can see big teeth here, okay, smaller teeth there, right? So your ear is going to curve this way with the big teeth meeting the smaller teeth, big teeth in the front, small teeth in the back. Or fur, I call them teeth, but you get the idea. Okay, and once your parts are heated, make sure that you are flipping your pattern so that you do the opposite. You're basically just going to roll your piece up right after it's heated so that it can maintain some of that shape. Okay, and if you wanted to hold it there while it cools, you can grab a piece of tape and just kind of stitch the two halves together to force them to just kind of stay like this while you work on something else, like the nose and teeth, for example. All right, so I'm just going to leave this be, let it hold its shape. Then I'll tackle these pieces. You just want to heat seal these so that they can get ready to be painted. No different than everything else that we've been doing for all of our parts. All right, now for the divisive part. So I'm using the same tape that I use to hold my ears together to just kind of mess around with the placement of the ears. Generally, I would say to keep it about an inch away, maybe more, but no closer than an inch from the edge of the eye here. And really the placement is going to depend on, what mood do you want it to emote? Like, do you want it looking confused where it has like one up and one down? Do you want it perky, like it's listening forward? Do you want it just kind of like basic and regular, where if you look from the front you can't even see the inside of the ear, which is basically the look that I have for this finish one here. When you look from the front, you just see the outline, you don't see the inside of the ear. On this one, I think I'm gonna go for something fairly similar, but I'm going to shift the ears, rotate them a little bit inwards so that when you're looking at the mask from the front, you can also see the inside of the ear, which in my opinion gives it a little bit more depth than the first method that I had. So again, really, this is going to be completely up to you. And once you have a general idea of where this needs to happen, you're just going to go ahead and place your Sharpie mark and kind of mark the start and finish of your ear placement. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be a general direction. Alright, so once I take this off, I'll put like a little line here so I know that's where I want the beginning of the ear to be. Line here, beginning of the ear. And then I can now go back in, make sure that they're at least evenly spaced from the eye, because that could make it look a little wonky. And then, yeah, you're good to go. So you can paint the ears separately if you'd like to, or you can just glue everything on right now and paint them afterwards. So you do have these shapes in your patterns or your DIY kit also. So this is basically going to go on the inside of your piece. Okay, you're going to glue that to the inside like so. But before you do that, if you did get the DIY kit, or even if you bought the pattern and you want to get these separately because you're making it, I think these will be like on the GiveWave Studios website, and it'll come with a little light that you can use, so you can have the same kind of light up effect that I have going on here. So you'll get two sphere halves, and you'll have an area here that you can wrap your lights around. And what you want to do is plant this here on the inside, get a sense of where it is it's going to stay. You might want to tape this down, okay, so that it doesn't move, which we'll do right now. Okay, so once you have this in place, you're going to use one of your circles and you're going to place that in here and just figure out where it is that you want it. So I'm going to place it a little bit more backward than forward, and I'm going to press onto the foam with my piece, okay, and then I'll pull it out. So now I have a general sense of where that's going to be, and so I don't lose it, I'm also going to trace it with my Sharpie. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for the other side. Now, another thing that we're going to do with this, if you look at the anime, whenever they have close-ups of him, he has these like weird, just kind of like folded skin lines on this black part of the mask that looks very similar to what you guys can see here on this. So all these lines that you see inside of this piece here. So basically we're just going to replicate that, and all that is, and I will show you with a marker really, is just a bunch of like rounded curves next to each other that kind of crisscross and overlap onto themselves. So basically just freestyle this, or pull up a Google image and be super specific with it if you'd like. But if you do get these pieces, you want to cut out your circle that you traced much smaller than what it actually is. That way the hole has some tightness to hold that circle piece in place. So basically, if you trace it with a Sharpie, cut inside of your Sharpie line, not on or outside of, but inside of the circle. Here's our cut. As you can see, it does not fit our circle all the way, right? But I have to push it, I have to force it in, which is exactly what we want, because we don't want this to just kind of like pop out, right? And making it smaller also helps curve out the shape a little bit, right? Without even having to do much to it. And then with that done, I can go ahead and do some light scoring. Some go a little bit deeper than each other, some are super light, to give it a little bit more dimensionality. Okay, so more or less this is what we have going on. Okay, once we have that, I'm going to go ahead and heat this up. And as you guys can see, all of our lines opened up. We have a nice textured inner dead eye thingy that's very different from the shape that we started out with. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this stuff. So now when you put this in here in your eye socket, if you want your eyes to be larger, by all means you can go in and, you know, give yourself an extra 1/4 inch or whatever the case may be. Again, this is one of those props that everyone has their own take on what the thing should look like or what they want the final result to be. So you know, just think of the patterns as kind of like a base, and you can definitely customize further. My instructions are merely guidelines, so any DIY kits that I do or tutorials that I make, you know, are just base instructions, and then, you know, you guys can customize to the extent that you would like to. All right, so let's go ahead and attach our ears. All right, I put my ears on, and I've also, you guys can barely tell, but I also went back into the chop shop and just used the stone bit and sanded down some of the seams a little bit. First off, you're going to want to heat up any areas that you have sanded. When doing this, you want to make sure that you go over these areas quickly. Just a quick heat seal on the surface. You want to avoid reopening your seams. And if you do see your seams reopening, just as the foam cools down, just kind of press the two parts back onto each other and let them re-glue again, closing the gaps in between the two pieces that connect. Okay, so this is the stuff we're going to be using to fill our seams. So it's a fairly simple process. You can use gloves to use this. I like to just use my fingers because I find that I have a little bit more control over it. And what you're going to do is basically you're just going to like squeegee this stuff into the seams. A generous glob on your finger and just kind of like squeegee it in so that you can see a lot gets trapped in the actual crease and then the rest just kind of like flattens out. Okay, and that's basically what we're doing for this part here. With that done, I'm gonna go ahead and wipe my fingers down of any excess, and I have a little water here. I'm just gonna dip my finger in, wipe it off a little bit, shake off any excess, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try and fade the sides because you don't want it to create an outline when it dries. So you just want to kind of like feather that out a little bit as you work this into the crease of the mask. Good. And you basically are looking to get something that looks like this. So that's pretty much it as far as like hiding seams are concerned. I'm going to do the same around the ears and maybe a couple of other areas, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so in the spirit of making this even more different than the first one that I made, I decided to add an extra layer of fur underneath the first layer here that we were working on. These two pieces will just connect to each other, and again, it is optional if you guys want. All right, so this piece, as you can see, all you're going to need to do is heat this, curve it as you would to get the three-dimensionality of the cheeks here, and then you're going to curl the hair, teeth, bit thingies out. You're going to curl them out. So grab your heat gun. This is going to get inserted and slid under my piece, like so. And I think the best position to start this piece in would be where your teeth actually start. So like right here. All right, so we had added this marking here on our piece. Now we're just going to do the opposite side. So we're going to do that top piece. Alright, so we're going to grab our X-Acto blade, and you can do one of two things. You can trace this proper so you can paint it in afterwards when you're done. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make a stencil, and I'm just going to spray this onto the piece. But what I will do though is add a few grooves that kind of follow this general shape really, that are going to be embedded in my stencil after the fact. And this will also give me a better sense of where it is that I decided my stencil should be when I'm done painting, because these lines will disappear. So it's kind of putting hair on your brows, right? So you're putting hair where the eyebrows are supposed to be. So you don't have to do too much outside of this general area if you're doing this, because the rest is just going to be with Sharpie, so there's really no point to doing any more than just the eyebrows for this step here. Alright, and that's really all we're looking for, is to have these lines so that once we paint, we have a general sense of where that stuff needs to be. Alright, on to the next step. Alright, finally time to paint. So you'll notice that my pieces are on a piece of sticky tape here, facing up, and then the other pieces are facing down, so it sticks the tape to the table, and when I stick my parts to the tape, they won't blow around while I'm taping. That's a lot of tape in one sentence. And then here also, I did go back in and score the outlines of my fur, where my top fur lines up with the bottom piece here. I didn't heat it up, I just scored it. It'll still show through the paint, so you want to have those references and not lose them, because once you have all these layers of paint on there, you're not going to see anything. All right, so we're gonna do 2 or 3 coats of Plasti Dip depending on how smooth you want this to get. If you did a good job filling your seams, it should look nice and smooth. All right. Okay, our Plasti Dip session is over. As you can see in the areas that we did a nice job filling, right? There's like a smooth transition between the two. This one, not so nice, but this one really nice. So you can tell, like, if you've done multiple coats, on this one I did 2, I think I forgot to do the second on this one. So clearly, multiple layers of that DAP white stuff definitely helps. Okay, and we're gonna go into painting now. Very simple. We're using berry pink for the nose. I'm gonna do a little fading effect with it with this satin ballet slipper. White for the teeth. Matte River Rock for the top portion of him, and then this satin otter brown for the bottom portion. Or I could have that reversed. I'll correct it on the screen. All right, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I'm gonna do a mix of these two for that secondary thinner layer that I did. Basically, the eyes are pretty much all set because they're going to stay black, so they can just stay that Plasti Dip. And take those away, and now we're gonna paint the rest of it. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our eyebrow patterns. We're gonna grab some tape. Okay, just tape down on your cutting mat if you have one. We're just gonna trace this onto the tape, cut it out with an X-Acto blade so that it leaves us with a hole. We're going to stick it onto this to create a mask. We're going to put more paper around it to protect the rest of our paint job, and we're going to spray the darker color onto there to kind of fill that in. All right, so I'm going to fast forward through those steps and catch you guys for the next one. So a quick hack when you're doing these masking jobs with the tape. So what I found myself doing is, because the tape won't curve like the paper would on that general path, I would just open up this small section here, right? Just so I can give this a little bit of flexibility. And then I'm just going to find that general line that I had left behind. Go ahead and place this down. And then use this excess. See how it doesn't quite line up, but that's fine because that allowed me to take the curve, so I could just kind of force that into place here. Right. Like so. We have things that are more or less symmetrical to each other. You're gonna do a lot of looking left and right, right? So just a quick little blurb on that. Back to the fast forward. All right, we're gonna end up with a Frankenstein monster looking like this. Now, clearly this would be a lot faster if you just painted these on. I'm a glutton for punishment, so I masked everything. And I'm just going to do these 4 pieces in my brown. I'm gonna take off part of my masking and then do the back of the ears with my pink. Trying to fade that out a little bit. Okay, fast forward time. Okay, we have our painting done. A little light pink fade on the ears there. So just gonna unmask everything and move on to the next. Right, so we have our part unmasked, looking pretty even actually, not too shabby. And then we have our little fade there on the ears with our spray paint. Alright, so now it's time to assemble our 2 pieces. Okay, remember you have your outlines here. You should also have some form of outline of where the inside of this matches up with the inside of here. And because I'm going to be adding this extra bit, remember you don't have to if you don't want to, because I'm going to be adding this extra bit, I'm only going to glue about 1/2 inch of this edge here to the inside instead of gluing the jagged edges onto this directly, which probably would be a little easier, but because I need to slide these in between these furry bits, I'm going to need this to be open and not completely sealed off, right? So, time-lapse time. Alright, I have my two pieces fused together, okay, and everything is looking fairly centered. Now we're going to do the nose, so you're going to pinch this, and you're going to decide pretty much how narrow you want this to be. If you can tell by my gluing here, I went about a 1/4 inch in from the edge, so that's where I'm going to line the nose up with. So I'm going to go ahead and curl the lip and start from the back here, make sure that it's nice and centered, and then I'll just work it one edge at a time. Okay, our nose is installed. Right, now I'm going to go ahead and add my extra fur layers as we discussed earlier. And again, this is going to be a personal preference thing of how far you want it forward or backwards. This piece, the pattern is meant to be longer than it needs to be so that it can overlap here, so that you can shift forward or backwards. I'm not too worried about these creases here. I'll hit it with a heat gun. That's going to disappear in a second. Okay, and when it comes to tucking these in, I literally just use a little bit of Gorilla Glue just to glue the tip of this to the inside of that. And I did the same thing here for the back of this to the back of that bottom layer, and that is pretty much it. I'm also going to glue down, so this piece here that's kind of like flapping upwards, I'm gonna glue it down onto that secondary layer. So if you didn't do a secondary layer, you can glue it down to just your bottom piece here. I think that's just gonna look a little nicer, and then we're gonna move on to the teeth. Alright, our teeth are in place, so glue it to the bottom jaw here, and if you want to cinch it further, you can also glue the top snout to the inner side of the teeth here. If you want to cinch it further, you don't have to if you don't want to, because depending on how much you want the teeth to flare, really, you either just glue it to the bottom half, or you glue it to the top and the bottom, so they go straight, they go out. You get the idea. Alright, so next step we're going to do is put some black on the inside of the eyelid here, and then we're going to install the eyes. Similar process, just put either a little bit of hot glue on either corner here, or some super glue, and just glue it in the orientation that you want. Alright, I swapped my eyes out a little bit, and I did a bit of a different kind of drawing. So in the anime, it's kind of like it's light here, dark there, and then obviously his pupil there, whereas this I had just put a line there. Not so good. So I just took the eyes from the other one that were lighter anyways, and they didn't have anything on them, so I drew that on there. So if you do get the kit, you will get these lighter eyes, so that if you do draw on it, it looks a little nicer and closer to what the cartoon looks like. Alright, so now for the fun stuff. I've printed out a couple of different angles of Inosuke's face and his mask, but I'm just going to look at where the lines fall and just kind of like freestyle the lines all over the face and trying to get that cartoony look into our finished piece here. Alright, so I'm going to time lapse through the rest of this, and I'll catch you guys for the next step. Alright, and with that we are done with all of our little anime lines. I did go a little overboard with this one a bit. If you look at the difference between these two, there's a lot less lines on this one than there are on this, and I think this kind of lends itself a little better to looking more like the anime. I did want to make this one a little bit different anyways, so I guess that's alright, but it's gonna be completely up to you which kind of like style you go with, you know, more lines, less lines. no lines, whatever the case may be. Okay, and as you guys can see, the inner edges there are just slightly darker, just a subtle nod, and then you can see this slight fade of purple into the ear here. I did end up going over some of my Sharpie lines, which kind of faded them a little bit, so I'm just gonna take the Sharpie back over those little bits. Okay, and our very last step, and this is our last step if you are putting lights inside of your Inosuke. You want to undo your light pack, grab the metal wire. Basically what we're doing is we're halving this. So fold this in half, and now what you're going to do is grab 2 fingers, wrap one end around those 2 fingers to make this kind of like a small little bundle here. Do the same thing starting from this end, 2 fingers, wrap it in a bundle like so, and you just need to give yourself enough slack between the two that they'll fit inside of the eyes. So you're going to grab your piece that has this, you're going to push through one side and push through the other and just kind of like clamp it down to both. That way it holds that platform and it stays in place. And then you can just slide your eyeball back in. Okay. And once you have your 2 pieces in place, you can run this to the side of your mask. You can glue it. If you do glue it, make sure that you glue the part that has the screws down first. That way you can still access your batteries, because if you do it the other way, then your latch faces the inside of your piece. That is pretty much it. This was how to make Best Boy's fur helmet, whatever you want to call it. It's not even a mask, it's like, yeah, that. If you guys purchase the patterns from the website or the Etsy shop or even the DIY kit, I appreciate the support. If you guys have any questions or concerns, be sure to leave them down in the comment section, just in case I skipped over anything or you need a little bit more explanation on a particular thing. I try to read the comments as often as possible, and let me know what you guys would like to see me do a tutorial of next. I most of the time take a lot of ideas from you guys as to what you'd like to see on the channel. Alright, so this has been Cass from GiveWave Studios, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.